Welcome to Social Work Week and to this event, Think Family, collaborative working across the lifespan. We are really pleased that you are able to join us this afternoon. My name is Iona Roberts. I'm one of the regional engagement leads at Social Work England. And before I will hand over today to our main speakers, we have an amazing group of speakers across from people with live and learn experience, social care consultants to national co-chairs for the Principal Social Worker Network. We have a legal disclaimer as well. Your views, information or opinion expressed by third party in this session are the speaker's own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Social Work England. I'm now going to hand over to Jack Savage. Jack is a social care consultant and lived experience speaker working with local authorities across the country. And I'm going to ask, in fact, Jack to join us.
Thank you, Iona, and may I please say a very happy World Social Work Day to everybody that's attending today, and the work that you do within the sector and your commitment and your creativity and innovation and your care is really appreciated. So welcome to this session on Think Family, collaborative working across the lifespan. And making the time to listen today as well, we'll have a QR code for a PDF that covers everything about the session plus more, and we'll put that into the chat, and there'll be a QR code on screen at the very end as well. I'd like to introduce the rest of the panel. I'm chairing this session, but I wouldn't be able to chair it without the wonderful work of the Children's and Adults Principal Social Worker Networks. So please could the panel introduce yourselves.
I'll make a start. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for making the time to join today's session. My name is Shungu Chigocha, and I'm a Principal Social Worker, co-chair for the Principal Social Work Network. I'm currently a Principal Social Worker within Children and Families within Achieving for Children, serving on behalf of the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. I will invite one of my co-chairs to introduce herself if she's on the call, Louise.
Many thanks, Shungu. So I'm Louise Spragg, Principal Social Worker for Telford and Wrekin Council Children's Services and National Co-Chair alongside Shungu and Tapua. Really happy to be here today and really grateful to have this opportunity. So I'm going to hand over to my next colleague, Tapua.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Tapua Julius. I'm Principal Social Worker in Cambridgeshire County Council. I'm also National Co-Chair. I'm going to hand over to Kate.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is my last thing that I'll be doing actually as one of the co-chairs for the PSW network for adults. So it feels like a really great thing to do on my last day. I'm the Principal Social Worker in Southampton until Friday, when I'll be going to the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. But I'll introduce my other co-chair, Gavin, who's here.
Hello, Gavin Butler. I'm a Senior Manager and Principal Social Worker for Adults in Cheshire West and Chester Council. And as Kate said, one of the co-chairs of the Adults Principal Social Worker Network. And I'll hand on to my colleague Vanna, please.
Thanks, Gavin. I'm Vanna Changley. I'm the Principal Social Worker for Adults in the London Borough of Waltham Forest, and I'm also one of the Vice Chairs, and I'll pass on to Seanna.
Hello, everybody. My name's Seanna Lassetter. I'm Principal Social Worker at Walsall Council and one of the Vice Chairs of the National Adults Network. So good to be here.
Thank you very much, panel. And I'm Jack Savage. I'm a person that draws on adult social care. I am an individual employer of a team of 4 PAs, and I have worked in social care for 32 years now, but as a very young child, I experienced social care as well. So the topic of today, of this Think family, is very one that's close to my heart, and I was very interested in doing this piece of work because I've experienced social care throughout the lifespan and many different ways of working and living too. I'm going to move on to the first question, panel, if you don't mind. And we're going to ask, what have you been doing to engage or involve those with lived experience to shape practice or change services? And Kate, I'm going to come to you first because I've delivered one of my workshops to your local authority, haven't I?
You have, Jack, and it was a couple of years ago now, and I think I was quite naive because I saw you speak in front of a whole room full of directors of adult social care, and you were it's just so powerful and made such an impact on me. I thought Jack has got to come to Southampton and talk to our staff about what it is like to draw on care and support. And I was naive because I was thinking, well, I'll just ask you to come and you'll just come and do it, because actually didn't think about how co-producing that together. And we really did work. We met a few times before we did the training session, thinking about what our values were together, what our outcomes were that we wanted together. And I think we were still thinking about what the workforce needed to hear as well, because it was going to be very different to what you obviously delivered at I think it was the spring seminar for ADAS where I'd seen you before. But yeah, so we did that together, and I should have known better, because I get a good understanding of what co-production is, having done a co-produced master's course. But yeah, it was just really great to work with you, Jack, in that way, and you really kind of held me to account, so that was good.
I suppose I want to reflect on our experiences in Cambridgeshire County Council, and I know my experiences will resonate with many colleagues across different local authorities who are really keen to engage in co-production. What we've done so far in Cambridgeshire County Council is we've got a participation strategic group that shapes how we engage with young people, with children, and people who draw upon our services. We have a care leavers group who've been involved in shaping our care leavers pledge, and the young people also inform our service delivery as corporate parents. One of our care leavers designed a logo last year in the summer, which actually captures the ambitions of the Leaving Care Service, which is to support, to care, and to be there for young people on their journey to their own homes and to their own futures. We recognize that corporate parenting is everybody's responsibility, and so we've just published our corporate parenting strategy to inform how we as a whole council can support children and young people. We've engaged in Bright Spot survey and we received feedback. We're now working together with our children, our foster carers, providers of care and support for our young people, practitioners and other multi-agency partners to implement the recommendations that we got from our young people. And our young people are really actively involved in all things within our region. We had a poem from Zoe that was shared recently at a national at a regional conference in September. And Zoe shares her experiences of leaving school without support, and actually it really conveys such a powerful message that we all need to read, reflect, and think about how we can provide a better service for our children and young people.
And we do have that on a PowerPoint, don't we, Tapua, as well? I wonder whether Iona could pop that up on screen for us as well, because it is very powerful, that logo and the poetry, and we'll provide all of the attendees here today within that QR code a real copy of that powerful poem as well, and the work that happened at Cambridge.
It is on the screen at the moment, the poem, and my colleagues supporting this session, they're also going to add the QR code in the chat. Thank you.
Shungu, would you like to say what's happening in your area and the work you've been doing?
Thank you, Jack. So still to Tapiwa's point, still on the point of co-production and collaboration with the children and young people in our care. As corporate parents within Windsor and Maidenhead, we value the voices of our young people and our children. So what we, put at the forefront in terms of our decision making, in terms of reshaping our service, is the messages that we get from care experienced young people, from children who are in care. We have a newsletter that goes out every quarter which says "you said." So when we use the terminology "you said," we're referring to what the young person or the children would have told the corporate parent in terms of what they want. So as the corporate parent, we do feedback to the young people, to our responsible key partner agencies, and also to the workforce in terms of how are we making a difference, because it's all about impactful practice. It's all about purposeful intervention. So, the document that I'm referring to has just been presented on the screen. What the young people and children or adults with care experience have shared with us is they are tired of being asked to complete surveys or feedback forms. So what we have championed is, something we refer to as the big conversation, where young people attend, they participate, they present their views as a united front in terms of how can we reshape the services we are offering to them. And that way of working has instilled that identity in terms of valuing them as unique individuals who are responsible in shaping what we deliver to them, be it in terms of a care plan, be it services that we commission. So it is part of our practice that has brought meaning in setting out why we are doing what we are doing as social workers, as individual practitioners, because it is all about them, not about us. We are there to give them the reassurance that we care, we are a caring profession, we are compassionate about what we are doing. They are not just a number, but they are individuals that have got feelings, that have got wants, that have got needs. So that has cultured a healthy, positive relationship with our care experience, children in care. And we have we have received a lot of positive feedback in how we have made them feel valued and listened to. So through the use of simple, plain language, we are able to tap into those silent voices. And what we don't forget is the diversity. We always touch on the aspect of diversity. We consult with children who are able differently. We consult with children who form part and parcel of our unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, and we make our messages to make sure that we deliver them in a language, in a format that helps them understand. So we are an inclusive organization, and through that way of working, we have fostered meaningful relationship when it comes to co-production and collaboration with young people. Thank you. I will stop it here.
Brilliant, thank you. I'll move to you, Louise, because you've got some fantastic initiatives there, and one in particular that I'm quite interested in, the Dandelion Project.
Thank you. So I'm going to start, and I haven't shared this before, but it's on my office wall. So the Dandelion Group is a group of lived experience parents who've experienced our system, who now work alongside us to change our system in terms of some of the difficulties that they had across social care when they were involved with our service. And we've formed the Dandelion Group to come together to support in changing practice. And I'm just going to read why they're called the Dandelion Group, because they came up with the name themselves. So dandelion clock flower, any child's joy. They grow firm, their seeds tight. When they're ready, they know, and the wind blows, and strengthened by each other, the wind on the child's breath sets them about their task. Becoming new flowers, strengthened, again gathered, like the seeds know all that will come and use all that they have learned to encourage and plant the new. And that was a poem from the Dandelion Group and why they're called dandelions. So they are together as one, but they splinter off really from the child's spirit to spread their messages. So I thought that that was important. They have done lots of things, and I am a member, an honorary member of the Dandelion Group. One thing I would just like to highlight is that they are working with the local Family Justice Board in terms of the West Midlands and supporting training and development across the court system, and that includes guardians, other local authorities, in terms of strengthening parental voice in the court process, and very much understanding that even if you are in that court process, that doesn't necessarily mean to be your final destination. There is hope, there is possibility of change, and together we can form a better system. So really the principles of the Dandelion Group, and there's some information that is on the screen and in the QR code, but I just wanted to highlight the need for the right voices to be in the right forums. So very much moving away from consultation to actually having parents with a seat at the right tables. So for example, they have supported some system advocacy work sitting within our partnership, and as a result of that work we now don't have a confidential section in our child protection conferences, because they put it to the partnership, how would you like it if you were in a meeting about your life? You're then directed to leave and have to walk back in knowing that people are privileged to information about yourself that you're not privileged to. That's one change that they've made. They've also had a parent report, so that everybody that comes to conference, including the parent, has a report, and then that informs the plan. So it's very much a collaborative family plan, which has more chance of working rather than a predetermined professional-led plan, which has no meaning to the person's lived experience. So that's a very brief overview, which I will elaborate on a little bit later. But that is a very short synopsis as to the wonderful Dandelion Group. And one thing I would just like to share, their lived experience is so valuable, but so is their learnt experience, the training and development that we have invested in, and more importantly, they have invested in, makes the group work and makes the group safe. So yes, I could speak about them all day because I'm very proud of them, but I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. Sienna, you've got some great things going on, and you've had some involvement with West Midlands ADAS as well.
Yes, so West Midlands Association of Directors of Adult Social Services have a co-production advisory group who you can see some of the members there, and they have been absolutely instrumental in terms of developing our approach across the West Midlands and shining on a light on what is working well. So they actually delivered a session on the 10th of March. If you follow the links online, you will see the session yourself, just talking about some of the great work that's happening around the region in relation to co-production. It's absolutely fundamental to the development and delivery of adult social care, and they are really key drivers within our region. So yeah, if you want some inspiration and ideas, please do check out that website link and see some of the great work that's going on.
Thank you. Vanna, you have something fantastic happening with apprenticeships.
We do. That's part of the things that are happening in Waltham Forest, because we've got a fairly well-established voice and influence group where we have participation workers who work with our young people and also with our residents. So we do have a child in care council, and they've been heavily involved in terms of practice and working with staff and doing some training around a program called In My Shoes. So really getting practitioners to think about how it will feel to be a child receiving services from social care. We also have both adults and young people involved in our interviewing. So they interview all our apprentices, for instance, but also they even most recently interviewed, in particular the adult side, our strategic director of adult social services. So all the way across the landscape, they're involved in that. And we have just offered 2 apprenticeships for 2 experienced care young people who are also residents in the borough. So there is a lot going on in Waltham Forest. And as a PSW, I've also been involved in working with an external organisation, Curators of Change, looking at information and advice within our council, and again involving our resident group in that, because I also took it to our managers forums and our senior managers, thinking about the language that we use when we write about the people that we work with, and feeding that back to our residents and seeing what other, definitions they would want us to be thinking about or considering. And so, that is actually work in progress. And as a principal social worker, I also meet up with residents, whether that's residents as part of our Engage resident group or for those from the Dementia Hub and other places. So thank you.
Gavin, I'm going to throw you on the spot now and ask you about things going on in your area.
Yeah, I think the best recent example I'd give, it was a review of what you might have thought of as quite a traditional mental health day and outreach service, and with a lot of involvement from the people using that service. It was kind of the day offer was reshaped, and the things that were really important to them were retained, and other elements developed. And the reablement service, the outreach service, sorry, was reshaped into a mental health reablement service, and that the core successful bit of that was setting what they call small goals. I'd say modest goals maybe, but reablement targets that were really about kind of re-engaging with the community over 12 weeks, and avoiding that kind of chargeable service. And actually the model was thought would hand over quite a bit to commission services, and actually really doesn't. We use a kind of outcome measure that shows that people are achieving those modest goals, and that is given a really good kind of reablement outcome. And some of these people have got quite impacted by mental illness. And the other thing that's really moved is changing the day offer has really diversified the age and the kind of the profile of people using it. A lot of young people from LGBTQ communities, in a way that really wasn't there in what, as I said, was quite a traditional and older, bluntly, mental health day service. But we've actually kept the original users, and I think it was quite slow progress, and we started it in March 2020, which wasn't a good time to start anything, was it? So it kind of had some reversals that, again, I think the engagement the service users saw us through, and it's really established now, and we're able to demonstrate some really good outcomes. But there's a constant check and challenge from the people who are using it.
Brilliant work, and hopefully a lot more years to come as well as that project evolves. Question 2 to the panel. I'm going to ask for just to spend 5 minutes here. Gavin, Tapua again, I think Louise, Shungu, so and Seanna, I don't know who wants to jump in with this, Can you introduce the joint principal social worker network priorities and just give a little bit more information around these?
Yes, Gavin.
I was just going. So I was just going to say one thing before Gavin talks about what they are and Tapio does. And I think what we found was we were coming into the co-chairship together, and we were thinking about Think Family, and we were thinking about how the division in the profession was happening and how important it is around transitions and everything else. So I think that's why really as co-chairs we really wanted to focus on having these joint priorities. So yeah, that was the background why we've got joint priorities this time, but I'll let the others talk about what they are.
Thanks, Kate. The one I'd want to sort of lead on really would be the transitions preparation for adulthood. I think transitions might be a term that's kind of in motion, and what Des Holmes calls the system leadership of it, and it seemed a really good one to have because it modelled one of the other priorities, which is collaborative leadership, where we're not doing that kind of zero-sum thing. And you know, my interest in the history of social work, you know, shows that keeping the profession together isn't a given. You know, probation left in the 90s, didn't they? And you know, so one of the things we've talked about quite a lot and tried to contribute to, principally through research and practice, it is about, you know, the common rights-based approach in that space, and that decisions made in children's social work can be consequential for people experiencing adult social work as they move through that. So we've talked about, or go on to talk about, kind of whole family approaches, but I think a whole person approach, moving through from, you know, in a perfect world 0 to 25, but certainly from adolescence to 25. And I think, you know, in a world where so much seems to be zero sum, especially in the kind of global political world, I think, you know, anything where we can introduce collaboration and the use of networks and exchange. There's so much effective practice out there in regard to transitions of preparation for adulthood, whatever term we're going to settle on. That there are the components, I think, of a really good model. I don't know if they're all in one place, but they're certainly, you know, less noise in some systems, and I think there's a lot we can learn from that.
Thanks, Gavin. So the adults and children's have got the 3 joint priorities, which is transitions, the ones that Gavin's just pointed on. We've got workforce. We recognize that actually it's really important for us to come together. We want to be a unified profession. We recognize that we do have the specialisms, but we all have one training and we are all called social workers and registered with Social Work England. So we're really working hard to keep together as a unified profession. And then we've got anti-racism as something that we want to champion and to continue the work that was done by our predecessors, particularly from a children's perspective. In children's, we then have an additional one, which is the social care reforms. I'm just going to hand over to Louise to just touch a little bit on there, and then Shungu will just talk a little bit more about anti-racism.
Thank you. So thinking about the element of the reforms in terms of family first and thinking about how we view family. So really understanding who is important to the child or young person, so their chosen family, and moving away from biological family and putting their voice at the heart of all of the reform agenda. Thinking about how we hear from people with lived experience, so children, families and their carers, and that they inform their individual plans, but they also inform strategic practice development and service design and delivery. So again, it's really about meaningful co-production, moving away from, as I said at the beginning, a survey or providing a view on something to actually supporting the change at all levels, including at that strategic level. And I think that that's really important. And then really thinking about how we continue to champion family and what that looks like for children and young people, and being creative with that, whether that's looking at kinship care, foster care, a combination of all of that, and then wherever possible, children actually remaining in the care of their birth families and having that support at the earliest stage. So those are really the main principles around the reforms, and that the decision making and the answers, if you like, are held within the family network. And I think that, that's really important. So Lisa Cherry, for example, which I'm sure many of you will know, will always say we do not know what we have not lived. So actually trying to understand the lived experience of somebody is actually listening to their lived experience and being curious and having positive regard for that experience. So I'll now hand over to Shungu.
Thank you, Louise. So one of the key priorities that we are focusing on is around anti-racism. So when looking at this priority around anti-racism, we are focusing on the workforce, not only the workforce, but also the service users that we work with. The issue around anti-racism has been spoken about for quite some time, but what needs to happen is, an improvement in terms of how we formulate our policies, how we implement our practice guidance and procedures to eliminate biases. We know that social work, the workforce is from diverse backgrounds, and we need to acknowledge that. But through acknowledgement of that, we need to look deep into our recruitment and our retention policies. Are we being fair in how we are supporting our workforce? Are the policies in line to support, the issues that may arise in terms of biases, anti-discriminatory practice? So it's about promoting equality, diversity, and inclusion, bearing in mind the diverse workforce that we have, and also the diversity that we have in terms of the service user groups that we work with. So we have been engaging with a number of key agencies to drive forward what the changes should look like, how we can reshape the profession. We are, having ongoing discussions with Social Work England, because we know, we have read so many times about how social workers or newly qualified social workers from the global Black majority have been, treated differently, be it in their ASYE program. So those are some of the issues that we are leveraging on in terms of trying to create a fair and equitable level ground to make sure that everyone is treated equally and that issues around disparities are addressed. So yes, anti-racism is at the top list of our agenda. Supervision is an area that we are also thinking about. How are we weaving in anti-racism practice when we are supporting our workforce, when we are talking about our families? Yes, so I will pass it on to Kate from the Adult Principal Network.
I think, Seanna, are you going to talk about the event that we're going to have in March?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of let people on the call know that, we meet regularly together as chairs to talk about these priorities and some of the actions that we can do together. And one of the things we're doing next week, along with Adi Cooper and Des Holmes, is supporting an event for senior leaders and managers around how strategically we can make some progress in terms of working with young people transitioning from children's to adult services. So I think it's just a great opportunity to just really put a good social work practice at the heart of those interventions, and for us as a chair team to kind of support with that national agenda and priority. So we're really keen to work together, and hence the title of this session today. It is about working across those boundaries and thinking family. in all of our practice.
And I think also, just to add to that very briefly, is that, you know, as chairs and vice chairs, we work in a very collaborative way, particularly, you know, thinking that we've developed these joint priorities ourselves, but also that we come together to, you know, with other organisations. You know, we have debates with Social Work England, with the British Association of Social Workers, with our chief social workers, with adult mental health leads and principal OTs, just to ensure that we're able to influence and shift things that perhaps, you know, where we can see what the issues are, so that it informs our practice and therefore the experience of the young people and the adults that we work with.
Vanna, whilst I've got you, I'm going to kickstart question 3 by going to you first. And I just want to ask, family is a universal thread running throughout both children's and adult social care. Why is it important that we continue to work together?
Well, just to give you my own sort of experience in that, you know, 6 years ago, when I first became a principal social worker, I was a principal social worker across both children and adults, because at that time we were very much within, you know, a think family model. So in terms of my position, it was very useful to be able to cross over and see where things met up and where they didn't and where they needed to. So I think there's lots of learning from both sides, both children and adults, because they both involve the lifespan. And, you know, if you think of this year, the theme of social work, World Social Work this year is, you know, intergenerational. So again, you know, we're working very, very closely with that. So from my experience as a PSW, you know, thinking about the value of learning from inspection in relation to Ofsted and what we can learn in relation to the CQC, I think, you know, there's a very good correlation there. In terms of family group conferencing, we know that happens but very well within most children's services. And apart from Camden, I think there may be other adult services that are just beginning to get to grips with it, like we are in Waltham Forest. So I think that there are clear aspects of our work where there's an overlap, like transitions that we're talking about. Also mental capacity and deprivation of liberty, those are things that affect both children and adults. And our recent, you know, PSW National Conference, we also had a group of young people talking about transition and giving us their top tips and us developing our own. So, you know, there is much that we can learn from in terms of us working together and thinking about it in that context.
Brilliant. Kate, you have a wonderful example drawing upon one family's experiences, Ella and Henry.
Yeah, so in Southampton, we had a woman with learning disabilities who was pregnant, and the midwife made a referral through to children's services. And we hadn't really had anyone with a learning disability remain as a parent in Southampton. Certainly not in my time there anyway. And what we found was that children's services and adult services come at things from a different angle. And of course, child safety is always going to be priority. But it's actually understanding each other as well. So what we found was that by working together, the adult social worker was able to work with the children's social worker with regards to making kind of different ways of communication. We made some kind of changes around expectations as well in some regard. I think the children's social worker had quite high expectations from Bella as a mum, which as somebody who wasn't reading and writing would have been difficult to have met. So there was a lot of work together and kind of just making those reasonable adjustments. giving time to Bella to be able to kind of think about things that have been said and checking back understanding. And both the social workers, they have delivered a session together actually, and what they've said is they've learnt so much from each other, because I think the adult social worker was quite almost thinking, well, why on earth is anyone not even seeing Bella as a person who could just be a mum straight away, and you know, why are all these kind of concerns, because she hadn't worked in children's before. So there was a lot of learning from each other. I think everybody wants the right outcomes, and thinking about the social reform and how we want children to stay at home whenever they possibly can. I think it was the working together that made the difference for Bella and Henry. You know, it's where you've got different legislation that comes together. As well, I don't think the children's social worker would have thought about using the Care Act. So the adult social worker was able to put in a very small package of care so that Bella was able to have a PA to kind of help her, and carers come in and help her kind of get organised, get into a routine, because Bella just needed a bit of extra support. She's a brilliant mum. She just needed a bit of extra support, which she wasn't going to be getting. You know, there's lots of young parents out there. She was a single parent as well. So, yeah, we were able to use the Care Act to have that provision for her. And of course, that is one of the domains about supporting and caring for children. So, the outcome of it is that Henry's no longer on a Section 20. They didn't go to court. I mean, at one point it did look like Henry may be removed from Bella's care, but they were placed in a foster placement. But now Bella and Henry actually live independently in supported living. And yeah, we don't have Bella's voice on here today, but there will be a link through the QR code of the presentation that the two social workers did. And Bella was really happy to voice actually what a difference it made having both adults and children's social workers working together for them as a family. And yeah, Henry's going from strength to strength, so it's a really good outcome for everybody.
That's brilliant. Tapua, you have the most fantastic proverb.
Yes, so for those of you that don't know, I come from Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe is part of Africa, and there's this African proverb that talks about it takes a village to raise a child. So my colleague Louise talked earlier about kinship care, and it's really, really important for us to think about actually who is part of that child's family. How does that child identify people within their family? And for practitioners, it's important for us to think about the diversity. What does family look like for you? What does it look like for me? It might look like different things. And when we think about kinship care reforms, you know, as principal social workers, we are integral to this transformation. We just had a PSW network where the focus was on kinship, and we heard from Isabel, we heard from Tim, from kinship team, you know, from Janine, around actually expectations about how we're going to be able to drive kinship reform as principal social workers within our local authority. In Cambridgeshire, very privileged to be piloting the practice guides from foundations. So it's quite an exciting time to think about what we're doing. But I just wanted to share an example of a family that I worked with when I was a children's guardian. And the children were subject to care proceedings, and they were a family from Zimbabwe. And the care plan for these children was either going to be long-term foster care, and there were 3 children of very different ages, but they also had family. And whilst their maternal aunt was able to provide a home for them, she worked, and so she didn't have the capacity to always provide that practical support. But when we had a family group conference, we identified other family members. There was grandmothers, there was aunts that lived local, and they were able to come up with a family plan where the grandmother would provide the practical care and support for the children, and the aunt would be able to provide financial support and all the other support. And actually we presented this as a plan, as an SGO plan, special guardianship plan for the children. And this was agreed by the judge. And it just shows actually how when we think outside of our own kind of Western lens and think about, you know, what does it look like for other families, we're able to get the right plan for the right child so that they can thrive. And those children went and lived happily with their family and were able to have their needs met and still maintained, you know, that family time with their mom, who was now receiving support as well from her family. So it's just something to hold on to when we think about diversity.
That's absolutely brilliant. Shungu, I'm going to come to you now, just for your reflections on that. I'm going to put a few other people on the spot within this question and come to you as well. We're just conscious that it's now 10:02 and we've got a lot of questions to fit in, so fire away.
Yes, I think what's important when we are working with families is understanding that sometimes we have to be compassionate, or not sometimes, but we have to be compassionate when we are working with families. You know, when we talk about trauma-informed practice, it gives you a different lens in understanding some of the lived experience of the families we're working with. So when we use the word think family, you know, we have to dig deep to find out in terms of, are we being sensitive to how we are approaching the issues of concerns with the families? You know, when I talk about sensitivity, this also refers to cultural sensitivity. You know, I remember when I was in the frontline practice, you know, sometimes, you know, I reflect back and I think of some of the questions or the comments or statements, you know, we used to make that were kind of brush statements when we're working with parents, when we're working with families, that didn't quite define the family's identity. So it's about the importance of taking a pause and understanding the family's identity, understanding of the family's lived experience, and that will help channel meaningful relationships with family. It will build a foundation based on trust, because without trust, sometimes we do not get the holistic understanding of the family functioning. So when we are talking about think family, we have to be mindful of the power imbalance that exists between us as social workers and the families that we support. Sometimes they look at us as people with authority, but it is down to us to unmask the profession and remind everyone that we are here to support, we are here to empower, we are here to enable. With the social care reforms, we are talking about think family. We understand the value that it brings to a child being raised in their birth family. On that note, I want to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak on such an important day of our profession. I'm grateful for the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shungu, for that reflection. I'm going to come to Louise now.
Yeah, echo what everyone else has said really, but just one thing. I think that we often need to understand the correlation between understanding the lived experience of the parent and carer on the child's lived experience. They go hand in hand. What the parent carer is facing on a day-to-day basis impacts on the child's lived experience, and really thinking about when children are separated from their family physically, they are not separated from their head and their heart, and how we talk about family and value those links is massively important. And really thinking about how we respond to parents who have had their children removed, and maybe where there isn't a plan for the child to return home, but how we honour and look after that parent in turn will impact on the child's well-being, because they will be worried about that parent, they will be thinking about that parent. So it's really important to understand that correlation, really, and then the impact that that will have on the child and young person's identity moving forward. So it's just really thinking about the lived experience of everybody in the family unit and how we can work together to promote that being better for everybody and enabling a strengths-based approach, because in turn it will impact on the child, and that could be a lifelong impact. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's that position of psychological safety, isn't it, throughout processes that will make a difference in the way they communicate. Seanna? Quick 2 minutes.
Just very quickly on family group conferences. Van has already mentioned that in relation to adults, and there is some national research going on around that at the moment, looking at use in adults, because it's sometimes about our definition of family, isn't it? And sometimes we're thinking about biology rather than networks of support. So I think we need to kind of think a bit more broadly about thinking family. What are the people important around the person? What does that network look like? How can we have a really inclusive conversation around sort of what's working well and building on those strengths? So I think there's definitely some opportunities there and some learning for us in adults from children's, definitely.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to move on to question 4. And just thinking about what you have just said as well, Seanna, that we must always bear in mind the other end, because we talk a lot about children and adults, but as a person with lived experience of being a relevant person's representative for my elderly father-in-law with dementia, it's kind of making sure that we're thinking as broad as it is long as well, and making sure that we have those thoughts that you've just talked about, Sienna, at the very kind of tip of life at the other side as well, and looking at those family networks. And the funniest thing I've heard this year is somebody say to me, yes, we use a strengths-based approach. No, we don't use an assets-based support approach. We've moved away from that. And I think we always need to keep the balance of using all approaches at all times with all people and all ages, and keep networks, citizens and communities at the heart of that decision as well. So that was me throwing my 2 pennies in. But it links quite nicely with the next question, because in my lived experience as well, trauma is anything but transient, and it can be quite a lifelong effect on health, well-being and how you interact with the world. Louise, how is trauma understood across the life course, and how are you embedding trauma-informed practice there?
Thank you. I think as a system we are much better now at identifying behaviours within children and young people that are often communication for their trauma, their traumatic experiences that they can't put into words, or that putting them into words is too difficult to bear. What I don't think that we are as strong at is also acknowledging that the child becomes the parent has the child, and the intergenerational link between those behaviours and how they can play out. So for example, when we have parents whose reaction to us as people in power are kind of fight, flight, freeze or fawn responses, do we have the same positive regard and compassion for those behaviours and regarding them as trauma-related behaviours, adaptive strategies, and responding to them in that way as we would do if they were children? Because often what you're being presented with is the little child in an adult body who also experienced trauma, and this is their coping mechanism. And actually understanding that the power that we have as practitioners coming in actually re-traumatizes and re-triggers some of those feelings of not being in control, and particularly if you've been harmed by a parent, a significant caregiver in the past. So it's really thinking about that, and then making sure that we are kind of, at the moment, we are fortunate enough to be the one wearing a badge. At some point we could be on the receiving end of a badge, and I think that's massively important, and the significance of a badge. So if I'm from a family where there is care experience, or I'm from a country where authority is really dangerous to me, my meaning of a badge will mean something totally different to a family who have only ever experienced a badge in a helping way. So it's just really understanding what do we bring to these relationships, and it is as simple as our power, the badge, the power of a badge, the power of place, the power of buildings. If the last time that a parent came to our building, they were advised that their child wouldn't be returning to their care, let's think about how they need to enter that building again and create a different story that we need to support with. So that's just some reflections from me in respect of that.
Thank you. Seanna?
In the West Midlands, we've heard very loud and clear for through some of the co-production work that we've been doing at a more strategic level, the importance of understanding trauma, and that some of the questions that we may ask can very much be re-traumatizing. And I think there's sort of growing awareness of in adult social care around this sort of concept, and another area of practice where we absolutely need to join up and really understand people's experience, and not make any assumptions, really.
Jack, I just wanted to come in just to say we have 1 minute left, and I wonder if the panel will kindly agree to take at least one question maybe from the Q&A, if that is possible. Sorry to cut you in there. Absolutely, Jack, you advise, all of you advise if it's possible to maybe bring one question in.
Well, we've been absolutely super duper duper, and we've actually written some of our responses and put them in with our QR code. So if we can put the QR code up on screen, and that will enable everybody to get out your smartphones, point it at the screen, and do download that. For those that cannot achieve that or haven't got their phones with them, there is a link in the chat that Gavin has put in already. And you can also message one of the group as well if you have any of our contact details, and we can pass that to you. So, question.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you absolutely to the panel. The question is, what advice you might give to a social worker already considering how to become better at collaborative working for that team family approach? Maybe one idea from each of you, or at least one of two of you.
I was just going to say, I've worked in children's and adults, so that's been really beneficial for me. But if you haven't, shadow and go and meet your other service areas, spend a bit of time and just really, just get to know your opposites in your service area. That would be
Thank you, Kate. If nobody else wants to come in, maybe we should stop there. It's already 1 minute past 4, therefore over our time. I just want to say a big thank you to all of you. What a fantastic presentation, and in fact, what a really critical subject you have covered for all of us social workers in England. And once again, we are going to say a big thank you for joining this session. Thanks, everyone.